Thus far, on 31 Days of Comics, we have provided on day 1 our favorite comic. On day 2, a comic that we would recommend to anyone no matter what. On day 3, a great adaptation into comics from another medium. And on day 4, a great love story. And all 4 of these have been personal choices. We've picked from the vast array of comics we have read to find the best fit for that day's prompt. But today, day 5 is going to be a little different. For day 5, the prompt is the first comic series you pursued. I think the original category was the first comic series you seriously pursued, but I don't think the seriously is necessary. The word pursued, I think, contains enough intention behind it. But what sets day 5 apart from the first 4 days is that this answer is not going to be a matter of opinion. We don't have to struggle to choose what best fits because it's a matter of history. It's a chronological fact. The first comic is the first comic, which means a couple of things. That today's category might be one of the easiest categories. There is no struggle. There just is remembering. But I think what this will lead to is everybody's answer is probably going to be different. If talking about great adaptations or great love stories like we've done before, we are talking about everything we've ever read in our whole lives. And there's a very good chance that a great work in the comics medium will be something that more than one person will pick. However, being chronological also makes it extremely arbitrary, so the chances of 2 people having the same pursuit is obviously high, but the chances of 2 people having the exact same first pursuit, that's going to be considerably lower. All of this to say that instead of analyses and opinions, I'm expecting today's category to result in comments that are going to be full of autobiographical stories of childhood. But, and there's always a but, of course, there are complications. Because as soon as I thought that this was an easy category where the answer is easily determined simply by going back as far as you can remember in your history, as soon as I thought that, I got stuck on the word pursued. And that's because I didn't grow up around monthly comics. I didn't have a pull list or an LCS, the kind of North American experience that a question like the first series you ever pursued seems to conjure up. It seems like this question is for people who followed a series, who followed it in periodical publication. But what about people who never had that as an option? What about people who only read standalone graphic novels, for example, or people who came into comics later in life through collected editions? Does the pursuit of a comic series necessarily mean it has to be singles or periodical? Those are the questions that led me to another way of translating pursued. Instead of treating pursued as followed or waited for, anticipated the way it would be with monthly comics, you could instead think of pursued as something you went after as a collector. So maybe the hunt on eBay and finding used copies, things like that, could also be considered a comic you pursued. Of course, this might mean that it comes later in life. But now creating the second definition, I somehow felt like I was missing the point or the spirit of this question, where the idea of the first comic series you pursued seems to be more about proto-reading and formative experiences. But just when I was beginning to resign myself over to that, I realized that the most appropriate answer as it relates to me was actually staring me right in my face. The correct answer to this question was literally at my fingertips, because of course the first comic series I ever pursued was Tintin. I was introduced to Tintin by Hergé by my mother, who borrowed these gorgeous European albums, books of production quality that we in my childhood had not experienced before. She borrowed these books from a library for herself and me to read, and I fell in love with them as a young child. One of the most immediately striking features of these books were their incredibly alluring covers, all of which were present in the back of every album, giving you a visual display of everything there was to read out there. And I wanted my mother to bring back each of these books one by one from that library. It wasn't until I found a couple of albums on the shelves of a neighbor that I realized that these books could actually be owned. The unprecedented deluxe nature of these albums in my childhood made them this rare and expensive series of objects that could never actually be owned by people people, but would only have to be borrowed from libraries. The fact that they could be owned just like my cheaper and more disposable comics sort of blew my mind. I think it also planted that idea in my mind that adults with no children around could also be fans and owners of comics. And once I found out that they could be owned, you could say that my pursuit of them began. Although being in first or second grade, I think I had no money, I had no allowance, I had no way of obtaining these things by myself other than begging my parents to buy them for me. They were very expensive books. I realize now that we had very modest means, but on one birthday, I did get the 7 crystal balls. It wasn't this edition. That one has long been worn away and lost to time. But this was the cover that fascinated me the most of all the covers, tied, I think, with Red Rackham's Treasure. These two covers, more than any others, created a sense of mystery of what is going on? How is this happening? What is this all about? And this is one of the only covers, I think, which demonstrates something supernatural and something out of this world in a way that most of the other covers don't. My pursuit, therefore, was a pursuit by proxy, but it did yield some success. Although it was only after I received the 7 crystal balls did I realize it was a two-parter. It would actually be many years later that I finally got to read Prisoners of the Sun, part 2 of this adventure. But I never actually felt like this was a cliffhanger. It was a complete story in of itself, and there would be another story that followed it. Sure, there were plot threads left absolutely unresolved, but I read this book over and over again, almost memorized every panel, which I realize now is the case for most of the Tintins. My childhood reading of these comics has sort of seared them into my brain, where they're almost memorized on a panel by panel level by me, even in my advanced age. Of course, I've made more than a dozen Tintin videos on this channel and will continue to do so. It also continues to be the series that draws most new viewers to this channel. So one could definitely say that my relationship with Tintin has only thrived and blossomed over the years. So there you have it. Very quickly, my first serious comics pursuit. Although in begging and pleading with other people to get me that, it is a pursuit nonetheless. Now I look forward to getting down into the comments and hearing your individual stories about your first comics pursuit. This has been For the Love of Comics, playing 31 Days of Comics. That was day 5. Day 6 should be up shortly. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.